Okay. Welcome everyone to Journeys Through the Books of the Prophets, continuing with Shmuel Aleph on the 18th chapter. The last time we learned together, we finished with the famous battle between David and Goliath, with David defeating Goliath, and that's how we ended it. And the 18th chapter begins that David is speaking to Shaul, and it says that when Shaul's son Yehonatan hears the discussion, and it appears it's the first time he's in contact with David, it says that his soul became intrinsically connected to David's soul, and that he loved him as his own soul. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, the example that is brought of a type of love that is not connected to anything, just pure love, is this example of Yehonatan and David. And we've mentioned a couple of times that we're going to see it today in the actual verses, is there's no figure in the entire Tanakh that says how many people loved another person. We already learned that it says that Shaul loved David very much. Here it says his son loved him very much. And we're going to see as we continue, more people show their love for David. And we learned already that David, the root of the word David is yadid, is beloved. Dodi. Lecha dodi likrat kala, as we say on Friday night. Let us go, my beloved, and greet the bride. So here it says that Yonatan and David, and we'll see they make a covenant between themselves. That it says because Yehonatan loved David so much, they made a covenant. And it says that Yonatan took off his robe and he gave it to David, and he gave him his sword and his bow. And it was just pure love. As we're going to see, this becomes very complicated because Yonatan is the son of Shaul. He's actually next in line to be king. But here, as we said, as in Pirkei Avot, his love was just not connected. It was just so pure. He wasn't thinking that, oh, David's going to end up taking my position. None of that entered into Yonatan's mind. And so after, the story continues, after David had killed Goliath, and they continued with the war against the Philistine. So it says that after this battle was over, that the women came out and they were singing and playing music, and they came up with a song saying that Shaul has killed his 1,000 and David has killed his 10,000. And then it says when Shaul heard this, he became very angry, and he was jealous. He was jealous. And he said, what more could David receive than the actual kingship? And here, a very, very important verse. So it says that from that day forward, Shaul viewed David with suspicion. This is a turning point in their relationship. Till now, David was his arms bearer. David was his musician who healed him of his evil spirit. He was the one to defeat Goliath, and then in the next war. But now Shaul becomes jealous, and it continued for the rest of his life. So the next day, David is playing music for him because an evil spirit has come over him. This is the jealousy and the paranoia that he's feeling. And he had a spear in his hand, and he actually tried to throw it at David twice. And David was able to get out of the way. And it says Shaul became very afraid of David. And it says because he knew that the Spirit of God was with David. And we pointed out last week is that part of this evil spirit is at one point, God's Spirit was with Shaul. And then it was taken away. And now David has the Spirit of God. And so Shaul is feeling this lacking, and it's called like an evil spirit. So he actually tries to kill David. And so what did Shaul do? It said that Shaul removed David from his proximity to him, and he made him a captain over 1,000. And David continued to succeed in his military abilities. And then it says very clearly in the 16th verse of the 18th chapter, it says, B'chol Yisrael v'Yehuda ohev et David, ki hu yotzei uba lifneihem. And now it says that all of Israel loved David because he went out before them, and he went out and he came with them. And we know from future exploits that David was the type of warrior who led the troops. He didn't stay in the background like many generals or captains will stay in the rear and order the troops. David led the battles, and he became very beloved in the eyes of all of the people. So now David is thinking, Shaul is now trying to figure out what to do with David. So he figures, I'll let him lead the battles against the police team, and let the police team be able to kill him, so I won't have to do it. So this is very interesting because later, we'll get to it at some point, when the whole incident between David and Bathsheba, and she was married at the time to Uriah, and David sent Uriah into the front lines in the hope that he would be killed in order to cover up the affair that he had with Bathsheba. And this was something that David, the prophet, came to David and explained to him what a terrible thing he had done. And David admitted to it, and he really did tshuva for the rest of his life. But here it's interesting because Shaul is thinking the same thing. I'll put David in the front lines and let the police team be able to kill him, and I won't have to kill him. Of course, that didn't happen. Now, if you remember, Shaul had promised that whoever can kill Goliath can marry my daughter. So here in the 18th chapter, his oldest daughter is Meirav. And at first it appears that he's going to give Meirav to marry David. And he rescinds on this and he gives Meirav to someone else. But his other daughter was Michal. And here it says, and Michal loved David. So here again, we see David attracts people who love him. We can imagine how much charisma that he had, that he drew these kind of feelings from people. And so after Shaul had given Meirav, he decides he'll give Michal, and he sees that Michal loves him, but he figures that her loyalty will still be with her father, with him. And so Shaul tells his servants, talk to David and tell him that the king wants to make you his son-in-law and you can marry Michal. And at first David is like, who am I to become the son-in-law of the king? Now here, as we've said before, the relations become so complicated because David has already been anointed. And yet when I went back and I looked at the text, and the text says that God said to Shmuel, go to Yishai, and one of his sons is who I chose to be king. So we went through this story already, that none of the sons were the right one, and then David was called. And it says that Shmuel anointed him. But in the verse, it actually doesn't say he anointed him as king. And that's one of the ways to understand, and we went over this last week, that when David went, his father sent him with gifts for his other brothers who were in the army. And his brothers treated him very roughly. And if you look at the verse, it's not clear that even Yishai or the brothers understood this anointing. Because it doesn't say in the text literally he anointed him as king. Because it would seem that they wouldn't treat him like this. And here, David himself, he took the position, it seems that he understood that he was being anointed, but as far as he was concerned, maybe will be in 30 years from now. Right now, Shaul is the king. And just like Shaul loved David, David was very loyal to Shaul. And it's clear as the story plays itself out, we see later David, already Shaul has tried to kill him. And we'll see, even in tonight's learning, he will try another few times. But David, if someone comes to kill you, you have the right to defend yourself. And not only that, but on a couple of occasions, which we'll learn later, he had the opportunity to kill Shaul, and even his people who were with him were urging him to kill Shaul. If you don't kill him, he's going to somehow kill you. David refused. He wouldn't touch. He felt that Shaul was anointed as king. And more or less, if God wants him to be king, he'll have to arrange it. David was not going to lift his hand against Shaul. So Shaul tells David, you can marry Michal, but instead of a dowry, if you want to marry her, you have to bring me 100 foreskins of the Philistines. David goes out and he brings 200 because the Philistines weren't circumcised. And so he brought back 200 foreskins, and this was his, in a sense, his dowry, an interesting dowry. And here it says again that Michal loved David, and they were married. And then it says, we're almost at the end of chapter 18, and it says that Shaul continued to be afraid of David, and Shaul became David's enemy. That's how deep his, here we'll call it paranoia, his fear was of David, because obviously he also understands prophetically that David will be king. And if David is going to be king, what's going to happen to him? And so out of great jealousy, fear, paranoia, and remember we tossed around other words, melancholy, manic depressive, split personality, schizophrenia, all of these in a little manner apply to Shaul. After this, David fought more wars with the Philistines. He's even more successful, more famous. And now Shaul is talking to his son. And he's telling his son, we have to kill David. And he's telling his servants, we have to kill David. Now, obviously, this is going to put Yonatan. See, sometimes in the text, he's called Yonatan, and sometimes he's called Yehonatan. It goes back and forth. So you can imagine the dilemma this puts Yehonatan. He loves his father, wants to be loyal to his father, but he loves David. He's made a covenant with David that they will be friends forever. And so Yonatan goes into a whole speech. Here we're in chapter 19. And he's trying to explain to his father, like, why do you hate David so much? He hasn't done anything to you. He's been totally loyal to you. He has defended your kingdom. Why do you want to kill him? And so after this whole speech, so it says that Shaul swore, as God lives. Just want to get the verse here. V'yishma Shaul b'kol Yehonatan. Shaul listened to the voice of Yonatan. V'yishava Shaul chayei Hashem im yamut. He, as it were, swore in God's name. As God is alive, David will not die, certainly not at my hands. And so Yonatan called David and told him that the danger seems to be past. And when Shaul says this, he means it. And this is part of, again, we use these different words in modern psychology, but in his manic state, he really meant it. He listened to Yonatan and he realized, like, I won't touch David. And yet, shortly afterwards, he's trying to kill him again. David goes out to war again. He's even more successful. And here we have like a repeat performance. David is back in Shaul's good graces. He's playing music for him. And again, an evil spirit comes upon him. And again, he tries to kill him with a sword, with a spear. And David, this time, he fled. He left. And then Shaul sent messengers to David's house, where he lived with his wife, Shaul's daughter, telling them that kill him. And so Michal somehow knew this. And she said to David, you have to flee. My father is really serious. He's going to kill you. He's going to come to the house and the servants are going to take you and they're going to kill you. So what did she do? The classic foible here is she puts in the bed like a figure. She stuffed the bed in a way and she made it looked like there was a head sticking out of the bed with some hair. And she covered, the whole bed and put goat's hair at its head. So from a short distance, it looked like someone was lying there. And the messengers came and she said, he's sick in bed. And they went back to Shaul and said, well, he's in bed, he's sick. Shaul sent them back and said, bring him to me. Bring the whole bed if you have to. They came back and they discovered that it wasn't David. It was a straw man. And David, Michal helped him descend from the window, and he escapes. Shaul is very upset at Michal, and somehow she kind of makes it that David. The text actually says that David threatened Michal, and therefore he kind of escaped on his own. So now what happens is very interesting. David goes to Shmuel. Now, since Shmuel anointed David, we haven't seen anything of Shmuel. He kind of disappeared from the story. We already learned that Shmuel never saw Shaul again. Once he was the messenger from God to take away the kingship. And even though, as we learned, Shmuel continued to plead to God to reverse this decree against Shaul. And so, but he kind of drops out of the story. And here David escapes to Shmuel. And he tells him everything that was happening. And word gets back to Shaul that David has gone to Shmuel. So he sends messengers to arrest David and bring him back to Shaul. And so what happens, the messengers come, and Shmuel, there was a band of prophets that were always with Shmuel. We learn later with Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, that at that time there were schools of prophecy, that the prophets taught others how to become a fitting vessel for prophecy. And here it just says that around Shmuel, there was also a band of prophets. And so the messengers came, and it doesn't say exactly, but we can imagine, we learned already when Shaul came upon a band of prophets, they were playing music and prophesying. And if you remember, the text says that Shaul also began to prophesy. And he became like a different person. And the word got out that Shaul was now with this band of prophets, and a term was born. Is Shaul among the prophets? It's kind of like a term of great surprise. And it didn't apply only to Shaul. It became like a term when something unbelievable happens. Is Shaul now among the prophets? Because his whole demeanor was very, very different than one would expect from a band of prophets. So these messengers come, and Shmuel and David is there, and these other prophets, and they're in a state of prophesying. Now, we learned already, the question is, what does that mean? They were in a state of prophecy. They were prophesying. And the explanation was that through the music, they were in a heightened level of consciousness where the presence of God was palpable. They were just on a very high level of consciousness, not usual normative consciousness. So these messengers who went to arrest David, they got swept up and they began to prophesy as well. And actually, when it says they were prophesying, they were singing and chanting praises of God. So they didn't return. So Shaul sends another group of messengers. They come and they begin to prophesy as well. When you read this, it's like an incredible scene happening here. Now, this reminds us of a very, very important story in the Gemara about a person called Onkelos. Onkelos, he was a convert, and he was the nephew of Nero, who was one of the top people of Rome. And Nero saw that his nephew was either in the process of converting or had already converted. And he was outraged. Like, this is like a scandal. Someone of like the royal family, the aristocracy, converts to Judaism. And so he sent messengers to arrest his nephew and get him out of there. And the story is they came, and Onkelos began to teach them. And they became so enamored with Judaism, they couldn't arrest him. And he sent more messengers. And they couldn't do it. Onkelos was so pervasive in his logic and what he was telling them. So here's a very similar story. Very similar story. And then, of all things, Shaul decides he's going to go himself. So he comes, and what happens? Again, I don't want to belabor this, but Shaul is suffering some kind of manic depressive kind of personality. At 1 minute, he's listening to music from David. The next minute, he's trying to kill him. One minute, he's telling his son, we have to kill David. The next minute, he's in a certain way promising never to hurt David. Here he comes and he gets swept up in this whole prophetic scene. And it's just really amazing, the description here. And it says that the Spirit of God was on Shaul again while he was in David's presence, in Shmuel's presence, in all of these prophets' presence. And he began to prophesy as well. And then it says that he stripped off his clothes and he prophesied before Shmuel. And then it says, and he lay down naked all that day and night. Therefore, people said again, is Shaul among the prophets? This was such an incredible turnaround that no one knew how to explain it. The commentaries say that most likely we don't take this literally. It means that he took off his kingly garments and he put on regular garments. But here it says that the whole day and the whole night he's in this altered state of consciousness. And that's how we end the 19th chapter. Okay, so at some point he is going to come out of the state of prophecy. We begin the 20th chapter. And David goes back and he speaks with Yehonatan. And he's like, what have I done? What is my crime? What is my sin that your father wants to kill me? And Yonatan says, listen, my father ultimately won't do anything without first revealing it to me. And so, again, they make this covenant between them, and they come up with a strategy. It's about to be the new moon. In ancient times, it was a minor holiday. Even today, many people treat Rosh Chodesh as a holiday. But then it was even stronger. And Shaul had started a custom that all the core people around the king would gather on Rosh Chodesh for a feast. And sometimes it would go on for a few days. It was a time to meet and to celebrate and to discuss. And so Yonatan and David come up with this plan that David's not going to go because he's afraid of Shaul at this point. He doesn't know what Shaul's going to do. And so he says to Yonatan, just tell him that my family is also doing a Rosh Chodesh celebration, and I needed to go and to be with them. I haven't been with them in a while, and please excuse me from being in the presence of the king. And so they come up with this plan, and they discuss it. It's a lot of verses here, and again they make a covenant between them that nothing will come between them. Again, because Yonatan is the son of the king. The king's trying to kill David. And Yonatan in his story is trying to prove to David that nothing will come between our relationship. And so in the 18th verse of the 20th chapter, It says, Machar Chodesh. Tomorrow is the Chodesh. They came up with this plan, but now tomorrow is the Rosh Chodesh. And I will give the excuse to my father, and probably he won't think much of it. And maybe even on the second day, he won't think much of it. But by the third day, if you don't show up, my father is going to wonder what's really going on here. And so this, starting at this verse where it says Machar Chodesh, is the Haftorah for when Shabbat is the day before Rosh Chodesh. So this is the Haftorah that's read, not the ordinary one of the week. It doesn't happen that often that Shabbat will be the day before a Rosh Chodesh. But when it does, this whole story that I'm going to tell now is the Haftorah for that occasion. And because it says Machar Chodesh, tomorrow is the Chodesh. So Yonatan says to him that on the third day, for sure, you're going to be very missed. So in this field that we're standing, you go hide behind these rocks quite a distance from here, and we'll have a sign that I will bring an arms bearer with me, and I will shoot arrows like I'm trying to shoot a bird or something. And then I will send the boy to retrieve the arrows. And you'll hear me if I say to the boy, no, the arrows are closer to me. Come back and get the arrows and bring them to me. Then you'll know that everything is okay. Everything worked out, no problem. But if you hear me say to the boy, the arrows are beyond you, go farther to get the arrows, then you'll know that it isn't okay. Things did not turn out well. And that's exactly what happened. But it explains that on the first day, Shaul asked, where is David? So Yonatan gave the excuse that David asked for permission, that he needed to be with his family in Beit Lechem. On the second day, again, Shaul asks, but on the third day, he's already suspicious. And here he gets very angry at his son. And he accuses him of being disloyal to him and choosing David over him, and what a disgrace he is. So here we see that this whole family dynamic is really coming to a head here. And he says to him, because it's very clear to Shaul, because he has a certain level of prophecy. He understands that David is going to be king, and he's not ready to let go. That's a little bit part of his, we'll call it his sickness here. Because remember, we started with Shaul being so humble and so effacing. And we see that he lost his kingship because on two occasions, he was humbled to a fault. He let the people, in a sense, rule over him instead of him ruling over the people, because he didn't want to assert himself. But here we see that humbleness has long gone. And he says to him, he says, don't you understand, as long as David is alive, you will never be king. He didn't understand that Yehonatan, that didn't matter to him. It's in Shaul's consciousness, he couldn't understand how that could come before his ambition that his son could become king. And he actually raised his spear to kill his own son. And Yonatan knew that his father was just too far gone. And he ran away. And then they did this whole scenario that they had set up. It was the third day. And he takes his arms bearer and he shoots the arrows. And he yells out, "No, the arrows are beyond you. Go get them and bring them back to me." And he did that, and then he sent him away. And Yonatan and David meet. And it says that that David fell on his face and bowed himself to Yonatan 3 times. And this is very common practice in those days. And they wept exceedingly. And Yonatan says to David, you have to go. It's too late to try to fix it up with Shaul. Just you have to leave, and God willing, everything will be well. He says, and that my seed, my lineage, and your lineage should be together forever. Like they made a covenant that they've renewed over and over again. And so David escapes. We're now beginning chapter 21. And David comes to Nov. There's actually a community in the Golan Heights now called Nov. It's not the same Nov that we're talking about. Nov was a city of Kohanim. Everyone there was a Kohen. And Achimelech was the leader of this place called Nov. And David comes. Everyone knows who David is at this point. He's a national hero. And Achimelech is like, he comes with like nothing. He doesn't come with other soldiers, doesn't come with a whole battalion. And he seems to be like all by himself. And he's like, what are you doing here? What's happening? So he says, the truth is, I'm on a secret mission from the king. Here, David is not really telling the truth. He doesn't really know what else to do. He has no food with him. He has no sword or spear or anything. He's like defenseless. He's hungry. And he ends up in Nov. And so he asks him, can you spare some bread? I'm on this important mission, and I'm not going to stay here, but I need to move on. Can you spare some bread? And apparently at this point, the Mishkan was in Nov. And here, the only bread they had was the showbread, the 12 loaves that were put on the table in the Mishkan from Shabbat to Shabbat. And they were exchanged on Shabbat. New 12 loaves were put. The other loaves were taken away, and the Kohanim would eat them. But they were sanctified bread. You had to be in a state of purity. So he questions him, are you in a state of purity? And he sees it's like a David is in some kind of danger. He can't really put his finger on it. And so he makes a decision to give him the bread that David asked for. Now a person is introduced who will take a major part of the story into the future. And he was Doeg the Edomite, meaning that either he came from the land of Edom or he was a convert. But Doeg was in this place called Nov, and he was one of the shepherds for Shaul, and he was minding the sheep near Nov, but he happened to be there when this whole exchange is happening. And that's all. It doesn't say anything, but later we'll see what happens. And then David says, do you have an extra sword here? I have nothing with me. This mission, I was sent so quickly, I didn't even have time to bring a sword. And he said, well, the only sword we have is the sword of Goliath that was being kept in the Mishkan there. And he knew the whole story. It was David who killed Goliath and took his sword and deposited it there. And so he gave him the sword, and David fled. And where did he go? He went to Gat. Gat is one of the 5 principalities of the Philistines. David, it just feels like he's being hunted everywhere. He doesn't know where to go. So he figures he'll go incognito, and Shaul wouldn't look for him in the place of the police team. And he goes to Gat, where Achish is the king. And he is, David is trying to mind his own business, and someone recognizes him. Again, David is very famous. He killed Goliath. He's been fighting the Philistines this whole time. Someone recognizes him. And David sees that the servant knows who he is, and he sees him running towards the palace. And so it says that David changed his demeanor. And what it means is he started acting like a crazy person. And he started drooling, and he started scratching the walls. And of course, people are watching like, who is this? This guy's crazy. In the meantime, the messenger didn't see this. And he goes to Achish and he says, you're not going to believe this, but David is here. David, the one who killed Goliath. And Achish is hard to believe that. So Achish goes and he sees this person who his whole face is disfigured, and he's drooling, and he's acting like a mad person. Now, it turns out that Achish's wife and daughters were all, we'll call it, mentally unstable. I don't know what the proper term is anymore. It used to be insane. They were not just mildly, they were out of it. And so Achish says to the messenger, he says, I don't have enough crazy people in my own family. You bring me another, throw him out of town. I don't want to deal with another crazy person. And so David escapes. And we mentioned this last time. I think Nahum, actually my wife pointed it out, and Nahum put the right source. The 34th Psalm, by tradition, it begins by saying, this is a psalm that David wrote when he changed his demeanor. And it says in one of the verses right at the beginning is, when we take out the Torah from the ark, Gadlu Lashem iti v'noramama shemo yachtav, that we should give praise to God together. And we say that when we take the Torah out from this psalm that David wrote in thanksgiving, that God gave him enough a state of mind that he figured out what to do. And that's how chapter 21 ends. So we're going to end there. And the next time we meet, I think everyone knows this by now, that this is our last class until June. Everyone will get a notice when we're going to start again. As I've said many times, you will be getting many emails, many postings of the Haftarah, numerical gems, other holiday kinds of videos will be sent. I'll be in touch by WhatsApp. So I want to just end this, that one of Rav Ginsburg's books is called Awakening Awakening the Spark Within, 5 Dynamics of Leadership that Could Change the World. It's really a tremendous book. I had the great privilege of working with Rav Ginsburg on this and helping to edit it and arrange it and bring it to publication. You can get it on the Galinai website, maybe on Amazon also. Awakening the Spark Within, 5 Dynamics of Leadership that Can Change the World. Why I'm mentioning it, we don't have time to go into all 5 dynamics of leadership, but the last one is called Holy Folly, a sense of folly. In this dynamic is also the being in a state of joy and being able to think outside of the box. That's what it means, holy folly. It really means the ability to think outside of the box and come up with solutions that don't jump to one's mind immediately, something literally out of the box. And one of the examples is right here, is David feigning madness in order to escape from Achish, from Gat. And it's just a very, very interesting idea. The other example that is brought is when Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, in almost desperation because the king and the queen have killed off almost all of the prophets, and almost the whole people have turned to worshiping the Baal, idol worship. And in almost a total out-of-the-box desperate move, he calls for a contest of the gods. We've discussed this before, but I'll go over it quickly, where he told the king, send 450 priests of Baal, and I'll come, gather all the people together to Har Carmel. That's where Haifa is today. And there's actually a cave there called the Cave of Eliyahu. And it's this whole spectacle. Eliyahu built an altar. And here we're told that he did something that ordinarily would not be permitted, is he brought an offering outside of the temple. And so he brings this offering, and he says, whoever can bring fire down from heaven, that will prove who the real God is. And he says to the people, how long are you going to sit on the fence? Are you going to worship God, or are you going to worship the Baal? So he took this huge chance here, because maybe these priests knew some kind of black magic and they could bring fire down. But he was thinking totally outside of the box. All day long, he gave them first shot at it. All day long, they're trying to bring fire down from heaven. And in the end, they're slashing themselves and doing whatever they do. And it's getting late, and Eliyahu said, okay, you've had all day, it's my turn. And it's said that it was at mincha time. It was getting towards the end of the day. And he poured water over the altar, over the offering, and he prayed a short prayer. Aneni, Hashem Aneni. God, please answer me. And fire came down from heaven. And the people were like, in response to this amazing event, said, Hashem, Hu HaElokim. Hashem, Hu HaElokim. So that's one of the other examples that Rav Ginsburg brings for this idea of thinking outside of the box. The other example that he brings is when Korach challenges Moshe, and he's rebelling against him. And Moshe says to God, he tries to make peace, it's not working. And he says, tomorrow you bring incense, and Aaron will bring incense, and whoever's offering is accepted, God will make known. And then Moshe turned to God and said, create a new creation to prove to the people that you've appointed me and Aaron as the leaders. Now here, we've been talking about humbleness. Moshe is described as the most humble person on the face of the earth. And yet here, he is adamant in fighting for his leadership position. So you would think this sounds like a contradiction, but it really isn't, because he wasn't doing it from a place of being power hungry. He knew it was God's will that he and Aaron were the leaders. And so therefore, even though he was the most humble person, he had to fulfill God's will. So he says to God, please create a new creation to prove to the people. And that's why the next day, the earth opened up and swallowed just where Korach and his followers were. And so this is another example of like holy folly, that it was somewhat not in the cards for Moshe to ask God to do such a thing, to make a new creation. And so here are just a few examples. And David, when he feigned insanity, is one of these examples of holy folly. Another expression for it is sometimes holy chutzpah, where sometimes we have to act with tremendous alacrity, or tremendous assertiveness in order to accomplish something. And in many cases, we can imagine from our own lives that there's some times that we have to think outside of the box. And this is actually one of the dynamics of leadership, the ability to do such a thing. I'll end with just to bring it into modern terms. During the Yom Kippur War, for those who have read the history, the first few days, Israel almost lost it. We were being attacked from Syria and Egypt, and they were really moving quickly, and the army was in disarray, and it wasn't clear what to do. And at the time, Ariel Sharon, who later became prime minister, he was one of the generals in the Sinai, and he came up with a plan that here the Egyptian army is pushing the Israel's army back. And so he said we should go around and we should start marching towards Cairo, and we should attack them from the rear. All the generals said this is outlandish. There's no way we can do such a thing. It's just impossible. And there are different versions of exactly how it happened, but some of the versions is that Sharon basically just kind of did it even without permission from the higher echelons. And some say he did, but the reality was that Israel took Egypt by, just like they had taken us by complete surprise in Yom Kippur, even though it came out later that the government actually knew that they were about to attack, and they made a fateful decision to let them begin the war in order that the world would sympathize with us. Obviously, that decision was a very fateful decision. Also, just like on October 7th, we didn't have the proper intelligence. They didn't have the proper intelligence. Many of the top generals did not believe there would be an attack. Others were convinced that any hour now there would be an attack. The whole thing kind of fell apart. But what Sharon did, he turned the war around. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We surrounded the Egyptian army, and they were caught in the middle. And we took tens of thousands of prisoners. And we were actually, we crossed the Suez Canal. We were marching towards Cairo. And that's when a ceasefire was called. I'm only telling you this because here's a modern example of thinking outside of the box. Holy folly, holy chutzpah. And here we see David HaMelech is actually following in a certain way Moshe Rabbeinu's footsteps. But David here paved the way for this dynamic of leadership. So may today someone please come up with a strategy that will once and for all defeat our enemies, so we could go about the business of making peace and bringing Mashiach. Bezrat Hashem, this Pesach will move us very close, if not into the full redemption. Be'ezrat Hashem.